So yeah, we can start recording. All right. So apologies for the loudness. I'm just in a cafe here this morning. Today is November 16th. Just starting off and kicking off the new Helm Dev channel for the Helm Dev meeting. So for any announcements for this week, Helm version 2.7.1 and version 2.7.2 were basically released on the same day. There was a little bit of a release difference between it was released for Tuesday 2.7.1, but we didn't announce it until this morning or last morning, and then we released version 2.7.2. There's a pretty if anyone's using TLS verification on their gRPC endpoints, that patch release is pretty important because it fixes up a security bug with TLS verification onto their side. So if you haven't upgraded, do so for that. Otherwise, I think that's it for announcements. So why don't we kick through stand-ups? Taylor, why don't you start?
Of course, you call on me when I have food in my mouth. Okay, so sorry guys. So my stand-up this week is that I did issue Sherpa-ing / sheriff / Maharaja, whatever the title of the week, and we also had a bug reported with tiller performance when it's being hit pretty hard. It's looking like my educated guess of a patch fixed it based on what Nick has found, and then some other things. So there's just two PRs that need to get merged, one to upgrade the gRPC to 1.7.2, I think is the version, and then mine, which builds on top of that and sets the proper keep alive options for that to work. So that was a great find by, I think it was Mike Laurent, and great debugging. So got that fixed. And then I'm not sure if we'll need a 2.7.3 or not for that. So that is my stuff for this week. And then I'm going to be working with, I'm trying to tie up some stuff with Michelle with the venue, because I'm trying to be the Portland person going to the venue. There's something that I need to do that I have not been told exactly what, so I'm trying to figure that out. That's it for me. So Adam, you want to go?
I would love to go. Let's see, this week has been mostly just focusing on these couple releases going out. I was definitely multitasking too much when I did that first one, and I forgot to do the release notes and stuff, so that's why it got announced the next day. So yeah, other than that, not too much on the Helm front. Brian.
Yeah, only Helm report I have is yesterday was helping to triage the TLS issue and a resolution for that. It's basically it though. I'll pass it to who didn't go. Michelle.
Oh, Stephen, you can go first.
I don't have too much to discuss on the contribution front of things I've done, but rather I have a question to raise to the rest of the team, and maybe we can save this for a parking lot. I'll at least describe the situation. Within IBM, there's a team that's using Helm extensively to manage their clusters and all the things installed in the clusters. And they have some, once again, concerns with authentication with Tiller. And they are interested in implementing some custom authentication in Tiller that would at least control who is allowed to connect to Tiller and tell it to do things. This doesn't have to do with what Tiller does to the API server. And we're wondering about whether or not there's ways that we can do that make it easier to continue including upstream changes. In other words, we want our fork to be minimal. Ideally, it would be like a plugin that sits on top of it. So we're wondering about if there's been consideration for this in the past, or if there's maybe interest in some sort of a pluggable authentication front end for Tiller that we could develop and contribute, and then the IBM specific bits of it would be something small that would sit on top. So it's all very vague, but I'd like to talk about that yet more later in the meeting.
Yeah, we can put that discussion in one of the discussion points afterwards, just so we don't derail the rest of the stand-up.
Sure. Okay. That's been the bulk of my my activity with Helm for the week, though. Michelle, do you want to go now?
Yeah. Not too much has happened around the Helm Summit. CFPs are still open. We're still working on getting someone over to view the venue, but the dates are on hold. So we do have the 6th and 7th reserved. And as long as we confirm that it looks good, then we'll be good to go. So still on track for that. On the code side, haven't submitted any PRs. I've actually been playing around with like RBAC profiles and like what different scenarios people might have there, and kind of like going through the setup and update of RBAC profiles and RBAC schemes for Tiller. So yeah, just doing some experimental work there. That's it for me.
Hey, Michelle.
Yeah.
Feel free to let me know when you need what you need me to do to get the venue stuff all worked out.
Okay. Are you on that? I don't know if you're on that venue thread, so I'll add you to the venue thread. So
I don't think I'm on that thread yet. Because I'm here in Portland, so I'm trying to make sure I can help, so you don't have to send somebody down here. I'm already.
Yeah, perfect. That'd be awesome. Thank you. That's it for me. Has everybody else gone?
I think I'm last, if nobody else is gone. Yeah, so last week, helping out with version, just kind of triaging issues to go into version 2.7.1, and then peer reviewing with Matt Butcher, Brian, and basically everyone from the Microsoft side on the TLS authentication bug for Tiller. And that's mostly been what I've been doing for the last week. And then this week, I guess, would be more discussion on like triaging issues on whether we need to have a 2.7.3 or 2.8. That's it. Does anyone else from outside of the core contributor group want to give a stand up or discuss anything or add anything to discussion points for today?
I'll jump in, Matt Farina. So just real quick. So one of the things that I'm probably going to try and start writing in the next week is status, Helm status, output is JSON. We're trying to do some testing over on the chart side, and when a Helm test fails, we want to programmatically say, go get the logs to all of the pods. And so we need the pod list in a form we can easily get. And, you know, parsing the text there isn't something we want to do. We'd rather have it in a form like JSON. And so I'm going to try and jump on that in the next week or so.
Yeah, that would be helpful, Matt. I have some pretty gnarly sed awk business that I use regularly to pick that stuff apart. So I'd love to have it in something I could throw JQ at. Nice.
And Adam, Matt Butcher said I should talk to you because you've already looked at this. So yes, you. No? Yeah. Okay. So I'll be coming your way. He said you tried to solve it in a generic way, and that was not easy.
No, that's why it never got finished.
Okay.
But yeah, we can definitely talk.
All right. So from what I've heard from stand-ups, and apologies again for the loud, from what I've heard from, oh, sorry, Chika, do you want to say anything or?
No, you wanted to know who others have joined. So we are from, Erica and myself are from IBM, and we are the ones who are trying to use Tiller for a massive project here for deployment. And we have a requirement on us to get the Tiller security done by December. So we've come up with an approach that Stephen was talking earlier about, and we would want to see if, the way Stephen described it, maybe a pluggable approach where we can plug that in and maybe like-minded people can use it and still work towards a better one, as Stephen had described to us yesterday. So we'll discuss whenever Stephen's topic comes up.
All right, awesome. So that's a perfect segue into discussion points. So there's that one. And then Taylor, you wanted to discuss, and I'm probably very interested in a 273 discussion about that PR. Why don't we kick off first the pluggable authentication discussion first? So the one thing that I do know, and that's actually why we did a kind of version 271, is that we knew that there is actually authentication for Tiller itself directly through TLS certs, as in like you can assign certificates to Tiller, and then Tiller will verify the certificate that the Helm client is sending up. And that essentially works as a way to verify that requests coming from a user is actually authenticated against the server. I'd be curious to know if, and this is kind of like, this wasn't really documented that well, or if there was any documentation at all. So in V272, we actually added documentation thanks to Matt Butcher. But I'm curious if this is something that might not be able to handle your use case, and if not, if the other solution is probably the better way to go forward.
Yeah, we were talking about this yesterday in an internal call. If I'm understanding it correctly, and I haven't gone and read that document that Brian just shared, I'm assuming that the TLS authentication is using the client certificate verification that's built into the Go TLS package, where you can give it a set of certificates, and it will look for a trust chain from the client certificate up to one of those. What we're talking about, and Chika, you can correct me if I'm wrong, I'm assuming it's more likely going to be bearer token based. Within IBM, we have a system called IAM. It's exposed to the outside world, but we use it internally for various things. That's an example of where you get, it's a JWT. And so you can jam that into your config file and authenticate to the API server with it. But in this case, we're looking at more just who can we limit who's allowed to connect to Tiller and tell it to do anything. So we would be able to look at the identity within that token and possibly go do an authorization check. So, I mean, in a sense, what we're discussing is rolling two things together. You can fail authentication to indicate authorization failure as well. That's probably what this would mean in this case. So it's not just determining who is this person, but really more importantly, do we want to let them talk to Tiller or not? And so we
want to make sure that, okay, yeah, in a finer level, they can talk to Tiller, but can they create this resource that they're trying to create, or can they delete this resource that they're trying to delete? So it's a little bit more, on top of that as far as authorization.
Right, and that's what I was saying. I think that the tunneling through of the credentials submitted to Tiller from there out to the API server to let the API server do its normal authorization is something that I suspect we're not ready to commit to in the Helm project.
Right. I don't think we'd necessarily be able to commit to that. However, I do know that Chance Zabolski, I don't know his last name, but from CoreOS, I know that last week he was interested in discussing about making Tiller as an operator, but there was some other connotations behind that as well, in the sense that the architecture, what he was proposing, is essentially that there would be a fronting gateway in front of Tiller that can only communicate with Tiller, and that's the only way you could communicate with Tiller. Yeah. So basically what would happen is that you would have to hit this front end first before you could communicate with Tiller. And that's sort of how we're doing it now, but the problem is, at least with the default Helm client, if you go and use it without tunneling or anything, if you're using the tunneling logic, you have to go through Kubernetes to get a request, and then you get a direct tunnel to Helm. Whereas in this proposal, there is no direct tunnel to Helm whatsoever. All communication goes through this gateway. So I wonder if that would be an interesting way to propose this architecture, in the sense that, because I know there would be other ways, like say Microsoft might be interested in like AAD, which is active, or Azure Active Directory, and then Google might be interested in their authentication or something like that. If that was a way that we could lock down Tiller from only communicating to this specific gateway, and then the gateway handles the bidirectional communication between the client and the server, in this case Tiller and Helm, that might be an interesting way to solve this problem without actually having to introduce anything into Helm's core.
Right.
So
Yeah,
would Tiller be hidden? Would Tiller be hidden from basically everybody, and the only thing that would be available as a resource would be the gateway that you're talking about?
Yes, and I know right now that's not possible, in the sense because if you're internal to the cluster, and if you're inside the same namespace, then you have basically unlimited access to the pod. If you know the pod IP, you have unlimited access to the Tiller server. But what Chance's proposal was, this proposal of basically this gateway handles the reconciliation, handles the authentication and everything else, and that communicates directly to Tiller. How that's possible, I'm not 100% sure. Whether Tiller is locked down outside of the cluster and just communicates using kubeconfig, which we've done in local development, or some other way. But I think there could be a way to make that possible.
I did see it's very strange how these things occurred. This seems to me, it can't be coincidence. You know this guy, I think his name is Angus Lees or something is his Slack handle. He posted an operator that does very much what you're describing, and it uses a technique I've never seen before. He takes the Tiller manifest, and for the container, he knocks out the port specification. So in other words, Tiller runs as a container that declares no port. And
so like
I don't know what the consequence of that is.
Is it a sidecar container?
No, it's just there's a pod with two containers in it, and one of them is the operator, the controller, effectively, and it connects on localhost to Tiller's default port. But what I'm not sure if that does something like you can't target a service at Tiller, certainly if it has no declared port, and I don't know whether or not that also blocks port forwarding from working.
Yeah, I wonder if that does happen, because we do have something where, we kind of had something like that, an architecture like that, where we had, two containers and there was an extra pod, but it could only be accessed by the deployment that it was running in, and nobody else could access it the way that it was configured.
Okay.
But it most definitely locked it down.
So that may be, I'm assuming it wasn't an accident. You could very clearly see he wrote a script that takes the output of Helm init and then munges a few things in it, like knocking that port out. So I think the idea was that only the operator's controller can make connections on localhost to Tiller. In that sense, then it's the permissions of who's allowed to create, update, delete the CRDs that are the custom resources themselves that he had defined to represent releases.
So would it be worth if we review what we are planning to do in the near term and get your feedback? Would that be something useful?
Yeah, definitely.
Is this something that we'd consider a proposal?
That's where I'm stuck. It's talking to you, Stephen. I don't think it's a proposal that'll be accepted at all. But I think it's a stopgap that we are putting in. So I don't know if you'll be interested to look at it or not, because it's not exactly something that I know that you're going towards from Tiller perspective. But would it be something that you would consider as, if it is the plugin model that Stephen brought up earlier, whether this is a way people can use it. Whoever is using the similar way that we are thinking about it.
That would be really helpful. Do you want to open up a GitHub issue on the project and talk about it? That'd be easiest, or do you think a doc would be easiest for this?
Either is fine, whichever way you suggest.
Okay, an issue would be really awesome.
Okay.
I think that also if you have it partway implemented, it'd be nice to be able to see which parts of it, where does it finally become specific to the authentication backend that you're using versus what is more common and just necessary to make, to get Tiller to take a different authentication path into account besides TLS.
Besides TLS, right. And I'm looking at the doc.
It uses TLS, Bear, and Basic Auth at the moment.
Okay.
So it's not very specific to just us. Others can use it as long as they're using the Bear or Basic or TLS. And I think this is actually based off of a pull request that just wasn't merged. And it was that pull request was from a recent proposal that just never got, I don't think it was accepted.
Okay. Was that Tamal's?
Yeah.
I think so, yeah.
Okay.
So authentication is very much based on what he had done, and Erica, you can correct me if I'm wrong.
Right. The authorization was on top of that pull request, basically. Yeah. We just wanted to make sure that Tiller by itself was secure, because currently, if anybody creates some type of any type of thing directly to Tiller and they skip Helm, they can and they will get in. And so that's what we're trying to prevent in our product.
Yeah, that pull request got rejected. I don't remember the exact reason why, but there was some major vulnerabilities exposed with it.
So can you touch on what vulnerabilities? I can post the issue right here.
I do remember one detail that came up was it got stuck on the details of how to forward on a TLS certificate. He was trying to cover all the bases of all the different forms of authentication, and then Jordan Liggett from SIGAUTH came along and said that's definitely bad. You can't do that, and it wouldn't work anyway because you're going to need the private key. And
and the issue is, I think it was pushing up like private credentials with the request. So that's how it was doing the authentication. So essentially, you're still trusting the user to promise they are who they say they are. So essentially, anybody could just say, "Oh, I'm so and so," and get in. I'm looking at the PR right now.
But then I also recall that, in fairness, I think that he's not here to speak, but I think Tamal got pulled away onto other things and just said, I can't.
Yeah.
I can't make progress here anymore anyway. So sorry.
The issue was we couldn't find a really good way of doing it. That's why I'm very interested to hear like what your guys' proposal is, because this is an issue that's come up quite a few times, and we just haven't been able to figure out a good secure way of doing it.
Okay, so we'll do what I think Michelle suggested. We'll open a Git issue and put the details in there, and we'll look for your feedback, whether it's possible to have like that as a pluggable option for people to at least use it, and while we keep working towards a best secure pristine solution.
Yeah, that sounds awesome.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
All right. So before Taylor has to kick off, so V273, that patch that you submitted, I have one reservation against it. Your patch, I absolutely agree. I think that's a good thing. The rebase on top of gRPC version 173, I think will introduce a breaking change in the sense that two different patch releases. So if you patch Tiller to version 273 with this new patch, which has the new version of gRPC Go, and you have a Helm client that has version 2.7.1 or 2.7.2 or version 2.7.0, and they're authenticating. I don't know entirely if the communication will work because of that breaking change in the gRPC protocol. So I think what we would need to do is just test out that one edge case to make sure that like patch releases of Helm and Tiller can still communicate with each other and everything's still fine and dandy. If that's the case, then I think we can go ahead and merge that through.
Okay.
And then otherwise, if that's not the case, then it might have to be slated for 2.8 because
purely for the breaking change thing. Yeah, that makes sense. I hadn't thought about that. How about that version skew might hurt it? So I can help test that. But I think that might warrant another patch release purely because of the fact I was seeing multiple people in there marking like that plus wanting that issue and commenting about how they'd had similar issues with Tiller at scale. And so I think it's good if we can to try to fix that up.
Yeah, and I mean, if it's worst case scenario that it is something that we need to fix, then maybe there's some other way we can fix it, or we can actually cut the release and say that this is sucks, but this is a breaking change, and you have to upgrade to version 2.7.3 on both the Helm client and its server side, and you can't just upgrade the client or the server for this one patch release. So.
Okay. Did anyone else have any problems with possibly cutting that 2.7.3?
Taylor and Matt, this is Nikhil here. Don't have any problems with it, but I can help test the difference in versions server client to make sure that to figure out backward compatibility. So I can follow up with you later, Taylor.
Okay, that'd be great. And thank you.
Yep.
And I know one of the recent patches to Kubernetes was because of a memory leak. Is this related to that at all?
I don't think it was. I think it's just related to how we're maintaining connections open. Essentially, what's going on is the gRPC never closes a connection, and then it holds open SOCAT on the kubelet spins up. So I don't think it's the same thing, but it theoretically could. But I thought those were different issues.
I was just curious because it seems like this issue just came up and a lot of people are having it. So I don't know if it was because of one of the Kubernetes versions that just came out.
Yeah. Okay, well, I need to drop. We do need to pick people for stuff next week. I won't be volunteering for any of those, but I will be trying to take out some PRs because we have a bunch in the queue. So I'm going to try to work on those. I'm going to see you.
And no meeting next week because Thanksgiving.
Oh, yeah, no meeting. Thanksgiving. Happy Thanksgiving, people in the U.S. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
See ya.